This is we're rebooting up the Landmark Idea Series, which is a series we've done here at CHIP since we moved over to Landmark in 2019. And we've had some really amazing speakers in the past. People like Shep Doleman, who took the photograph of the black hole. People like Ray Kurzweil, who invented the idea of the singularity, and others. And today, our speaker is no less exciting. Peter Lee, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years, is now president of Microsoft Research, and he leads research across 14 laboratories. He tells me that in 2023 or so, he was about to retire, but then this alien intelligence landed on the planet, and he got to be one of the guys in charge of introducing it to humanity, which he's been doing, especially in the healthcare domain. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine. He serves on the boards of several major institutions at the intersection of AI and medicine, including the Mayo Clinic's Board of Trustees and the Board of Directors of the Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine. He previously served under President Obama as a commissioner on Enhancing National Cybersecurity. And in 2023, he co-authored The AI Revolution in Medicine, GPT-4 and Beyond, with Zach Rouhani, my friend and mentor, and Karen Goldberg, my friend, and the woman who introduced me to my wife. So I feel like Peter is basically part of the family here. And hosts the companion podcast series, The AI Revolution in Medicine Revisited. Time named him one of the 100 most influential people in health and life sciences. And so Peter's going to talk for 30 to 35 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions from you guys. So just hang on to those questions, and there'll be plenty of time for a brisk and active discussion.
Wow, thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me here. Ken didn't mention we both also serve as co-leaders of one of the major committees in National Academy of Medicine. We were just complaining in this office about how much work that's been. So I am really pleased to be here, and I'm actually on a little bit of a road trip. I had just given a talk actually to an internal Microsoft conference of lawyers, of intellectual property lawyers. They wanted to talk on roughly the same topic, and then in a couple of weeks, I'm actually speaking to the elders of the Mormon Church in Salt Lake City. So very strange to think what to say. This is obviously the most expert and possibly the most critical and influential audience of those three. But what I tried to do in order to save some work for me is to just look back on where we've come over the last 2.5 years or so, and maybe shed a little bit light on the future. Actually, when I spoke to the lawyers being very organized in how they do their conferences, they told me strictly what I should talk about. They said, give us 5 reflections and then give us some predictors of the future. And so I've structured the talk that way. I actually have 5 plus 1 if time allows, and then some things about the future. I just for this audience, being much more kind of intellectually deep and technical, I hope you'll forgive that some of these reflections are at a fairly high non-technical level, but there are some that are more technical level. And then the slides, which I've shared here, also have a section of references to publications in leading journals if you want to learn more. All right, so for me, I think I was trained as a computer scientist. I started in academia, then served in the government for a couple of years, and then was recruited to Microsoft. But really didn't have much connection to healthcare or to medicine, medical science or research. So for me, the beginning of what became a fairly deep immersion into health and medicine started in 2016. And 2016, I was very happy. I had just risen to the level of leading Microsoft Research Worldwide, which is just a fantastic research organization. But then our CEO, Satya Nadella, for reasons that I still don't understand, removed me from that position and replaced me with a really fantastic colleague, Eric Horvitz, who's now our chief scientist, and asked me to work on rethinking Microsoft's business in healthcare technology. And I didn't understand why he was punishing me. And I also understood immediately that this was going to be really hard because Microsoft at that time, when this happened to me, I had inherited 169,000 commercial contracts in healthcare and life science companies. So you can imagine Microsoft has enterprise contracts, business contracts, with pretty much every single health and life sciences organization on the planet. The smallest contract I inherited was a one-nurse clinic in Nairobi, Kenya, and the largest was United Health. And there's everything in between. But I think what our CEO was concerned about is he was seeing the coming wave of data and machine learning and AI, and there was nothing going on in that part of Microsoft that was doing it. We were just selling Windows and Office and Active Directory, that's all. And so it's like getting dropped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and you're asked to find land. Which way do you swim? And you can feel pretty sorry for yourself, and I spent several weeks feeling very sorry for myself. At some point, you see other people swimming around just as aimlessly, and some of them are actually drowning, and makes you feel a little better. But we did start two projects. One was to assess whether Microsoft's cloud, Azure, and whether our competitors' clouds like AWS or Google Cloud in 2016 and 2017, whether they could, in a legal and compliant and secure way, host protected health information. And the answer was no at the time. So that was one thing to work on. But the other, which is more down the center line of Microsoft, was to try to help what in Microsoft business terms would be frontline health workers, doctors and nurses, administrators. What can we do to help them do their jobs better? And so the very first thing, being a naive techie, was to try to solve this problem where anyone has this experience. You go in an outpatient setting to see your doctor, and in the encounter, the doctor's attention is on a laptop. And it doesn't take long to learn why this happens. And so again, in our naivete, in 2016, we started a project called EmpowerMD to try to have an AI system that would observe a doctor-patient encounter and then assist in the automation of some of the clerical burden surrounding that encounter, such as setting up an encounter note. And we enlisted two collaborators with this. One is a brilliant doctor from UPMC, Shiv Rao, and the other was Joe Petro's team at a company called Nuance. And we started this project and started to make quite a bit of progress. And in fact, the progress after a couple of years was profound enough that UPMC Enterprises, their venture arm, agreed to provide seed funding to Shiv to start a company, which is today known as a bridge. And then, especially as we got deeper into our collaboration with OpenAI and we're running into restrictions, we couldn't share the OpenAI technology with the Nuance folks. We made the big decision to start the road of acquiring Nuance into Microsoft. And so the first reflection in all of that, it's been now 9 years, or going on 10 years in this journey. And I feel like, in this sense, very serious AI of the really most advanced form, generative form, is happening for real. A bridge, I think, is doing Within Microsoft, the former Nuance folks have a product called Dragon Copilot. And what happened last August is at the Epic user group meeting, Epic announced that they would be offering ambient clinical intelligence, which is the industry buzz phrase, as a default feature in their EHR system, and importantly, for no additional cost. And so within Microsoft Research, the level of satisfaction for the people who had started on Empower R&D was really just off the charts. We had to hide our joy because, of course, the business around Microsoft Dragon Copilot now is in serious danger, as is a bridge. But it's a good thing for the world of healthcare to kind of get that foothold into the real world of the infrastructure of healthcare delivery. And I think now it's deployed in over 200 health systems, and within each health system, the use is spreading. At this point, just on Microsoft's product alone, millions of clinical encounter notes, chart, and after visit summaries are being initially drafted by generative AI. And it's sort of I'm always struck when I meet people today. They think that, well, of course, and that it seems straightforward. But when we had started on this in 2016, we just weren't sure that this would ever be possible. And our leading scientists, like Sebastian Bubeck, who's now at OpenAI, when we first started deploying these things at real clinics, was really quite shocked. So there's a reality. It feels humble right now, but if you're sitting where I'm, from my vantage point, it's quite amazing that's happening for real. So that's reflection number one. By the way, that reality is also reflected just in thousands of papers having to do with generative AI in healthcare and medical research. We counted over 180 papers in the top tier medical journals on some aspect of generative AI in medical research or in healthcare delivery. And the institutions like the World Health Organization or the AMA or the National Academy of Medicine all have worked overtime to try to provide guidance, try to suggest appropriate use of these things, to raise alarms, all sorts of things. And while we always think of these organizations as being slow, the pace of this happening all in the first 18 months after the release of GPT-4, I think is actually lightning speed for these organizations. So the institution of healthcare, I think, and medical research has really confronted the reality of AI in a really forthright manner. All right, so now second thing, a question I get asked all the time in all walks of life is, will AI replace human beings in job X? Sometimes it's a little more pointed, will AI replace me in my job? Will my future doctor be an AI? And I don't know the answer to that question. But if we look historically at advanced knowledge work, it's very, very rare to find cases where technology has replaced human beings in advanced knowledge work. That has happened routinely in physical labor, but very hard to find in advanced knowledge work. If I look at medicine, I have only settled on 2 medical specialties that have been essentially replaced by technology or made obsolete by technology. One is, of course, the technology of brain scans and related, giving rise to neurology, has basically destroyed or eliminated the specialty of phrenology. And then today, of course, a whole panoply of advanced technologies has replaced the use of barbers to do bloodletting, as a treatment, for example, for the flu. But beyond those, it's very, very hard to find cases. Now, that of course doesn't mean that there aren't very deep alterations of the way that people will work. In the mid-1950s was the first time that there were serious proposals to use ultrasound as a diagnostic tool in medicine. And so, for example, in OBGYN was one of the first areas, but there was tremendous pushback. And in fact, there were fears about the safety of ultrasound, whether it would harm the reproductive abilities of the mother, whether it would harm the unborn child. And furthermore, there were training deficits. Doctors didn't know how to use ultrasound and were not trained in how to read the results of ultrasound. And so it actually took more than a decade for ultrasound to become standard of care in many medical specialties. And some specialties took longer and some took shorter, but typically it was more than a 10-year process. One thing that's important here is that technology hasn't replaced, for example, OBGYNs. And furthermore, it also has created what we call in the consumer markets a patient flip, a consumer flip. Whereas in 1955, a patient might have been very concerned by the doctor who wanted to use ultrasound. By 1970, it would be more common for a patient, if encountering a doctor that said, I don't believe in that technology stuff, I'm going to put my hand in a patient, that patient might actually report that event. And so the kind of expectations flip. And it seems clear to me that at some point, maybe much less than 5 years, the idea that a doctor would not use AI assistance in some meaningful way might be very, very concerning to patients. The main point here, though, is that at least so far, we don't see evidence that human beings are replaced by any technology in advanced knowledge work. Now, of course, this is a very special technology, so we can't quite see the future here. And furthermore, this doesn't really tell us much about the transitions that human beings have to go through as they change how they do their work, and the number of human beings that are needed in different specialties of advanced knowledge work. But it looks more likely than not to me that AI will be, as Microsoft's marketing would say, more of a co-pilot than a replacement for human beings. So you can imagine these first two reflections are really aimed at the lawyer audience that I spoke to before. I think that they might work well for the Mormon elders as well. All right, so let's shift now to areas that I'm actually more comfortable about, which are more on the technology. There, of course, have been now for a couple of decades persistent efforts and struggles and huge amounts of investment in trying to take advantage of digitized clinical data. And it's been really, I think, frustrating and difficult. And that's not to say there haven't been major advances and that there aren't great successes that every organization can brag about. Boston Children's is one of those. But I think the outcomes of this have fallen far short. And for anyone getting into this, I'll speak for myself, starting in 2016, it has ended up being a long string of really humbling experiences. Things are just very, very difficult. The messiness of real-world patient data and sparseness of it is really just incredible. What is happening today is that multiple labs, particularly in the AI space, are actually now very close to achieving what we might call a universal medical abstraction, something that's able to derive appropriate structure from nearly any real-world patient data. I want to emphasize, I'm very proud of the work that we do at Microsoft and Microsoft Research, but there are great efforts in laboratories around the world that have been making really impressive progress. If I could just focus on the work that I know best, which is our own, we have a GPT-5 powered universal abstraction that is actually extremely powerful. We've made a limited version of this in open source available, but with key partners like Epic and a few other companies, we've been using the kind of full-fledged version. And so what does that do? I sort of list the kinds of applications that people dream about using real-world data. One of the efforts that I've been very excited about has been with the company Epic. So some of you might know Epic has a database called Cosmos. And Cosmos has a database of Epic medical records pertaining to just over 300 million unique patients. That ends up being about 15 billion medical records in total. And importantly, those medical records, the identity matching of those records across different Epic instances has been resolved. And so you get very precise and correct longitudinal histories as recorded in the sequence of medical records for the 300 million plus patients. There are limitations in Cosmos. The data itself is not super rich, but it pertains to a huge segment of the population. And so an effort that we've been doing with Epic has been to see if we can train a foundation model on the Cosmos database. And if you think of a foundation model like GPT-5 as a model that does next word prediction, predicts the next word in a conversation, what this model, which is named Curiosity, does is it predicts the next medical record entry when prompted with a sequence of medical records representing the past patient history. And so what happens is, don't worry about tokenization, that's a technicality. If you have some long series of medical records pertaining to a patient, you can use that as a prompt to Curiosity, and Curiosity will do the next medical record prediction. Technically, just as you have with large language models, you're actually getting an output of the entirety of all possible follow-on conversations, in this case, follow-on future medical histories. And then there's post-training and so on, rank. But for these purposes, once you have this, then you're able to do many things. You can do a simple counting of these simulations to get a differential diagnosis. You can do readmission kind of risk assessment. You can even do the simple thing of just pre-writing the next clinical note ahead of time for patients. The point here is that what we're seeing with next medical record prediction are the same scaling properties that we've lived through in the training of the GPT models. As we went from GPT-2 to GPT-3 to GPT-4 and GPT-5, we had always seen really beautiful what are called loss curves and scaling properties that have given us the ability to predict that there would be the emergence of new capabilities and higher degrees of generalization to new tasks post-training. And so the scientific question from the computer science perspective is, do the same scaling properties emerge when training on these tokenized medical records? And the evidence now to us is very clear that the answer is yes. And so in this paper that we co-authored with the Epic team and Yale University, goes through some of the early evidence of this. one just image of this is that this shows we trained 3 different models we call small, medium, and large. And so the precise amount of computation and data for each one is described in detail on paper. But for then different post-trained applications, comparing with the best published models here, we look at the performance of these specialized models against the best academic models. And here you can see in every case we get a very consistent pattern of improved performance and improved underlying generalization to these specific applications as we get larger and larger. And so I would say that we are at the kind of GPT 2.5 level of scale with curiosity, hard at work against the GPT 3 level of scale. Moving up to each level of scale ends up being about a 10x increase in cost of compute. So it's not cheap to do these things. And things always go wrong. But the early evidence right now, I think, is very, very exciting. I want to pound on this idea of foundation models because this is a philosophy at Microsoft Research and at OpenAI that is less present at some other laboratories, such as Google DeepMind. And I don't know who's right in the end. Probably no one is right or wrong. But our interest in foundation models, getting a foundation model at scale, let's say a GPT-4 plus level of scale, is an extremely difficult thing to do, very expensive thing to do. And so you can ask, why do that? If you have a specific application like 60-day readmission prediction, why not just train a specialized model to do that? Why worry about building these highly generalizable foundation models? And the reason for that is Microsoft being a platform company, we need platforms that have value to any individual organization in the planet. And we inherit that ethos within Microsoft Research. And so our belief is that if you have a highly generalizable frontier scale foundation model for something, then any individual organization with just their own data can get superior results by fine-tuning or post-training just on their data. And thereby avoid the complexities of having to get into agreements with 6 other health systems to share data and pull it all together and do all that stuff. So that's a philosophy around things. And within Microsoft Research, we're very disciplined about this. And consistently, we find that this works. So for example, our Aurora weather model is a frontier level upper atmospheric model predictor that was trained on millions of hours of Fortran simulations. And that model then, when given, say, to the UK Met Office, they're able to use a very small amount of, let's say, Copernicus nitrogen dioxide sensor data, maybe as few as 10 million data points, and specialize the Aurora Foundation model to do nitrogen dioxide dispersion prediction. That is 4x more precise than all previous specialized models. But importantly, the Met Office didn't have to try to make an agreement with NOAA or the Chinese weather authorities. They were able to do it on their own. And that's the power of the foundation model. Now, of course, it costs millions of dollars to train the Aurora Foundation model to begin with. But once you have it, everyone is enabled. That's the thesis. Is that better than going after just targeted specialized models? I'm not ready to conclude anything, but this is the approach that we give, and it's very important to us. And we just see this over and over again. Like everyone, we're doing a lot of work on digital pathology. And our approach to digital pathology, well, first off, we're focusing on whole slides. That's a little bit of a our digital pathology models are designed to be foundation models. And again, we're able then, using a single health system data, in this case, the Providence Health System data, be able to do post-training of our GigaPath foundation model to get superior results on 18 out of 26 digital pathology tasks. So it's just a pattern that we're seeing over and over again. Again, I think I have to stop short of claiming that it is not possible to train a specialized model to achieve even better results. But the level of generality and unlocking the ability for a single health system to achieve these results is I think, very, let me claim that it's a very practical point of view. And we are seeing this happen now. We were just thrilled with the Microsoft research. We published these papers on our foundation for digital pathology. And Mount Sinai then is able to use our foundation model and just with their own pathology data. No one else is able to get the most precise model for specific biomarker detection of lung cancers. Again, they didn't have to go through the complexities of having to collaborate with Harvard or somebody else. They can do it on their own. And so I just really wanted to pound on this idea of foundation models. There's this other thing that you've all heard about foundation models, multimodal models as well. I won't spend too much time on multimodal models, except to say that multimodal models aren't only for doing things like doing radiological assessments, but what we're seeing in multimodal systems is the ability to generate synthetic data. And we just had a paper last month in the journal Cell showing the ability to use multimodal models to generate very large amounts of very precise synthetic immunofluorescence data. And that's been a very, very interesting thing. So I won't say much anymore about multimodal systems. All right, so now let me shift to biomolecules, molecular design, and prediction properties of molecules. Just to take a step back, there's been always a dream about having an AI where we can just write down the molecule that we want, its properties, give it to the AI, and the AI will just give it to us. And of course, that's been a dream for a very long time. There are many versions of that dream. We really haven't had that for most of our professional lives. But what we have had are simulators. Sometimes it's Fortran simulators. And so if we're given some physical structure, we can give it to the simulator and get either an approximate or a chemically precise simulation of the dynamics of those, say, proteins or small molecules. And so these are around, and they are landmark achievements in computational science, but they haven't been that practical because, of course, they run so slowly. I remember, we were looking at a very simple molecule of giclin in not even an aqueous solution, just in a vacuum, and we calculated that the world's largest supercomputer is taking about 1.1 million years to compute the full, chemically precise fold of that protein. And so that's been a struggle. Not that it isn't useful, it has been useful in computational science, but it hasn't led us that far. Now what's happening in the AI world is, while these things are slow, they do produce data at every time step. And from an AI training perspective, that data is perfectly labeled. And so using generative training techniques, we can actually take that data and train an AI model. And what we're seeing now at great laboratories around the world is the consistent pattern that this works. And of course, the magnificent complexity of biology means that there's still a long way to go. But if I could just brag for something in Microsoft Research, we use this basic pattern in order to get an emulation of the chemically precise emulation of the interaction of two biomolecules. So this is a molecule BioE. And we were really proud that this made the cover of Science last summer. But all of the things you're seeing in laboratories around the world, I think, follow roughly some version of this pattern. And I think that has created a lot of hype in the industry. There are tech investors who I think don't quite understand just how complicated things are, who think that this solves biology, which it doesn't. But it does allow us to dream. And there are more and more dreams about having AI assist or largely automate the whole cycle of scientific discovery. And then the last reflection is about just how fast things are moving. In 2025, the big theme was agentic AI, agent-based systems. And there are different aspects of agentic AI systems, but one aspect is the ability for AI models to collaborate and interact with other AIs and with human beings. And so in Mustafa Suleiman's team, and some work led by Dr. King and Harsha Nori and others last summer, what they did is they built an agentic AI system involving 5 LLMs. And they call this a virtual doctor panel. And so, one LLM is the hypothesis agent. You can think of that as the LLM that interacts with the patient. You have a patient encounter, the patient says, I had a rash on the left side of my neck and I was sore throat. Started about a week ago. That's all you get as a prompt. And so it generates hypotheses. There's a test chooser agent. The challenger agent is one I like the best. That is the grumpy agent that just disagrees with everything. Challenges things, wants more explanation, and so on. And these LMs engage in a chain of debate that results in choosing whether to ask the patient a question, order a test, or provide a diagnosis. The ST bench then is the agent that is essentially the patient. And in collaboration with the New England Journal of Medicine, New England Journal of Medicine had a trove of around 300 complex diagnosis cases that have been unpublished. We used those unpublished cases in order to inform this agent. So this agent wasn't allowed to reveal anything that a patient wouldn't normally know, but respond as an agent. And so in this agent-based system, what happened was very interesting. This model called MAI-GXO, GXO stands for Diagnostic Orchestration. There's this orchestration there. You can see that as you increase the budget that the doctor panel is allowed to use for lab tests, in fact, while it's unconstrained, that it goes up to over 85% of these complex diagnosis cases being solved. This red cross here is the panel of human doctors that were attempting the same diagnosis, which was about 1 in 5. And so what you're seeing is this unreasonably big jump in capability and underneath a huge reduction in issues of logical errors, mathematical errors, and hallucinations. And this is really quite interesting. Now, there are limitations here because these NEGM cases, they aren't cases like the common cold. They're all very complex cases. But the fact that you can have frontier level systems like this is pretty amazing. One other thing to say is that these LMs were mix and match. We used models from OpenAI, Anthropic from Google, and just mixed and matched them and got consistent results every time. I just very briefly want to say that our ability to do assessment also has been advancing rapidly. Within Microsoft, Microsoft Research, we developed an evaluation pipeline. It's a fairly substantial pipeline called Eureka. We just released last summer a form of Eureka as open source. But where we're going now within Microsoft Research for evaluation and assessment is towards more psychometric evaluation of these models, particularly for applications that involve interacting with beings. Given time, I'm going to skip this. This is maybe, I meant this next section more for the elders of the Mormon Church. I'm going to skip that. And go to my last couple of slides here, because I was asked to try to make predictions of the future, which I hate doing because they're always wrong, and I'm always wrong. And so I was challenged to predict what might be happening 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. All right, so I think some would say this is already happening, but I think that the practice of the very first stage of small molecule design will be largely in silico if it's not already in some laboratories. Certainly in new ventures, it's happening. In the larger companies, of course, there are very, very accomplished scientists with years of intuition and gut instinct that might be slower to shift, but this is spreading pretty rapidly. I think that these models, based on real-world data, are the immunofluorescence model we published in Cell, or the curiosity model that we've been developing, and 1,000 others around the world that are emerging. They're going to provide new ways of approaching healthcare delivery. One of the things that we see people doing with curiosity is just presenting a patient. And then instead of asking for a diagnosis, asking for just the right database query to send to Cosmos to retrieve 200 patients who are just like this, and then to summarize their patient journeys, their outcomes, and how they are diagnosed and treated. It's a different way, it's certainly a different way of approaching the problem than, say, the curriculum at the Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, where I'm a board member, and I suspect that most medical schools. And so I think that within 5 years, it's going to become really much, much more standard practice. In a way, this is already happening to some extent with cancer, but I think it's going to spread really to be much more routine across many specialties and even in general care. This year, the big tech companies are going to be talking a lot about closed loop discovery. And I think that there'll be practical versions of this in the next, with much less than the next decade. And then 20 years, I talked to Eric Topol, he thinks this is 10 years. At least as a techie, the more I've come to understand the complexity of human biology, I just don't see this happening within years. But it's certainly the level of enthusiasm and optimism about emulation of whole cell dynamics, I think is going to lead somewhere. Now, these are the good things. I thought it was bad to only have positive predictions because, especially, I'm coming from Microsoft, and so I have a vested interest in making everything more rosy. But the world doesn't work that way, and especially with powerful technologies, it doesn't work that way. So I tried to say, what are the bad things that might happen? So, man, there is a lot of very naive venture capital going into biotech startups to do early stage drug design, small molecule design, drug development. And I think it's already, people talk about biotech winter, I think serious washout. And I think that is possibly going to create a trough of distribution. People might say bubbles bursting and so on. I think that's quite likely for the next couple of years. I had the chance a year and a half ago to speak at the Bilderberg conference. Bilderberg is the annual summer conference for European prime ministers and foreign ministers. And I was only there because they had a bunch of AI people, since AI is now a political topic in Europe and around the world. And I was quite surprised at the concerns, the safety and security concerns that are being expressed, particularly in the application of AI in biomedical research. And so it wouldn't surprise me if in 5 years, say, 40 nations or several dozen nations decide to place strict restrictions on the use of AI in different forms of biological research. I don't think it would be a good idea, but I think it could very well happen. It seems to me that with these closed loop systems, by luck or by brilliance, one of these systems is going to come up with a Nobel-worthy result that that essentially, and maybe even write and submit the paper to science. And I think that is going to be yet another kind of psychological bit of damage to scientists. And it will be controversial. I don't know what the editors-in-chief will be or the Nobel Committee will think about these things. And then in 20 years, I think it's quite likely. In fact, I think we'll see this within 10 years in mathematics. In mathematics, we already have systems that are just stumbling onto proofs of previously unsolved proof problems. The thing that's nice about mathematics is that when you write the proof in a proof-checking language like Lean, you have simple, decidable algorithms, such as forms of type checking, that tell you whether the proof is valid or not. So you can check the validity of the proof definitively and easily, but that doesn't mean that human beings can understand the proof. And so I think in 10 years, we'll have math proofs that we know are valid, but that no human mathematician can understand. And I think in 20 years, that will be also the case in other realms of science. And so here I've chosen on the bad side to focus on things that will affect all of us as scientists. There are obviously other societal, legal, national security kinds of risks as well. But if you just think about the world of science, I think that these are things that I see as possibilities. And they're really just food for thought and for discussion. All right. Last thing is just to say, just to have one slide about Microsoft. Health and life sciences at Microsoft is a very complicated thing now. So the thing I started in 2016 to remake our business at Microsoft is now this coordinated effort across 6 divisions of the company, which is total chaos and pandemonium, but it works reasonably well. We don't do things on our own. We try to be very kind of platform centric, so we work with the 6 Ps. And then we have the exceptional strength of research, and I'm very proud of the fact that just in the last 12 months, we've had 9 papers in CNS journals, in the prime CNS journals. So we've been very, very productive, and a lot of that productivity in our research has become possible because of the use of AI in our research. So with that, I will stop, and thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions.
I'll start with the first question, and then pass these mics around to folks in the peanut gallery here for questions. So something just down to earth. In your own, you don't have to violate your own HIPAA here, but in your own medical care, how much AI and and how much doctor in the loop, and do you see that balance staying the same or changing over the next 2 years?
I use AI all the time. I think I do what so many people do. I don't understand how to read the CDC test results, even something simple like that. My wife had a mysterious and concerning mass in her uterus, and there were lots and lots of tests. Some of them quite advanced, like a Grail gallery test, cell-free DNA, blood biopsy, and so on. And you get these reports, and the company like Grail even tries to dumb it down, but it's very hard to know how to interpret these things. And so that's, I think, something that many people do. Even more mysterious than labs is the trying to understand what these messages and mailings from your insurance company mean. Completely mysterious. And what I've learned is that what I've learned is that even the CEOs and C-suite executives at major payer organizations like Elements and others, they aren't able to decode these things. And so you see those kinds of things. In the case of of my wife's issue, it was also very interesting to use a deep research agent in order to really get a thorough download, including, of course you get like a 30-page report, but then to have it summarized in 2 pages and to have serious understanding. The biggest use that I had, though, was way back before GPT-4 was open to the public. And my father was very ill. He had been undergoing a long illness. And I was living in Seattle. My father was in Southern California. I have 2 sisters, one in Pittsburgh and one in Phoenix. And we were all struggling from a distance to figure out how to keep up with the care of my father. And the thing that would happen is the tensions get created, and the relationship between me and my sisters started to fray. So a typical case, and I've since learned that so many people go through this, we would get that golden 15-minute consultation with a specialist. And so my sisters and I would be on the phone, and we would get into an argument about what to ask, how to use that 15 minutes. And so the thing that was so important for us was just to give all of the medical information, to explain the situation, me and my 2 sisters, and then to ask the simple question. In our meeting with Dr. K, what are the most important 2 questions to ask? And it, whether it hallucinated or not, whether it's right or not, it was actually very accurate, I think. It just had the effect of bringing the temperature down on things. And so, for all the technical prowess and things like the MAIDXO model and that kind of thing that I found personally most beneficial for me.
It was great, very disclosing and helpful. And what I'm hearing is you're sort of powering yourself up as a patient, but it's really within the traditional doctor-patient relationship. That's how you're using it right now. All right, let's ask a few questions. We can start right here. I think who you are, and then expert question. And we'll try to go relatively brief questions so that we can get to a few people.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. G.
Sure.
I am a PhD fellow here at Boston Children's, and I thought the foundation model was very interesting because basically what I'm trying to learn is I'm a psychologist, and if we can predict, basically looking at wearable data when someone's going to have a depressive episode. So I'm wondering if you're getting to do things with mental health, or if it's too hard because it's still very subjective and behind other specialties.
No, I think that there's huge opportunity there. By the way, on the curiosity model, working with Epic is always always a bit complicated. They have very serious business interests in all of this. But our desire is for foundation models like Curiosity and others to be very widely available. And so if we can, in the same way that the GPT models or Claude or whatever, Gemini or widely available, we want these things to be widely available in one form or another. And so with that, I think that there are very simple mental health applications that I think don't involve direct mental health therapy between AI and a patient, but would inform a therapist on how to think about things. Even just the simple thing to predict, what would therapists miss in this patient in the future? Those things can be asked and emerge out of a model like Curiosity. And one thing that I hear consistently from patients is they feel let down sometimes by their therapist, which is why there's always some shopping around. And the ability to even deal with those sorts of issues, I think you can get a lot of insight out of these models.
So you think that maybe we're going to be able to help patients directly and not just predict if they're going to have an episode?
So what you're going to see this year in the tech industry, and you're already seeing it with the recent announcement by OpenAI and Anthropic, is that AI companies are going to be going for the jugular, a consumer appliance that is your full interface for your entire life to the world of healthcare. And so that is going to happen. And I have no doubt that at some point that will involve mental health support. And I think that at least our current government is increasingly receptive to these things existing, in part because, as Ken and I were talking earlier, they align with the government's interest in opening up access by consumers to the health data. The big question in my mind is whether these things, whether the incentives and motives of tech companies will align with the public good. And then the second question, just being more selfish, is whether there will also be a benefit in all of that to medical research and researchers. Those, I think, are bigger questions. But the reality is that we're going to see online appliances that I suspect, if I come back 12 months from now, we'll all be using.
So Gagana has a question.
So, I'm Gagana Savova. I'm faculty chief, and I have been information extraction from the EMR for over 20 years now. So I have a more technical question, but first, thank you for very balanced and nuanced presentation. I very much appreciate the nuances. So my technical question is, how do you see the math moving beyond the transformer, the attention representation? Because beyond all this, we have the same math, and the math has limitations. And then to ground it in a concrete example, what you have the prediction of the next chart, how do you derive the representation to actually predict the next chart? Obviously, it cannot be the tokens. So how do you create learnable representations, and how do we advance the math?
These are amazingly perceptive questions. Maybe another question that I would add to that, which I think is implicit in what you were saying, is one of the things that's magical about language models is that most human languages around the world, there are exceptions, but most human languages change very, very slowly. So English, for example, changes very, very slowly. There are some languages like Hangul in Korean, or even Urban French is evolving more rapidly, but the change is slow generally. And furthermore, the models, at least the ways that we're using AI today, tend not to have a very direct influence on the evolution of language. But we can imagine that, let's just, in any of the applications that I sort of picked on with a model like Curiosity, the whole point is to actually improve and change healthcare, to make it better. And so there's a big technical computer science question as to whether the models stay valid in use. We already know that, for example, standard specialized deep learning models, the AUC curve might be great on day one, but 6 months later, after using them, they're now below the bar in terms of acceptability. And I think that that's just a general thing here that we don't really understand, and it's sort of related to what you said. So I don't really know how we will think about this because when we're in medicine, we're just in a realm that where the whole point in healthcare delivery, we're in a realm where the whole point is to improve and evolve what we do. There's another one also, which is kind of brutal on the business of healthcare. It was startling to me to see in MAI DXO that the more money you give the AI, the better it does. Well, that just begs the question, well, how much is enough? How much do people deserve? And again, we can imagine having another set of agents that represent the insurer or whatever, and try to, but if you imagine the full evolution of the whole system, if our goal is to use technology to actually advance healthcare and make it better, it's a bit, at least to me, it's mysterious. And that's different than the biomolecule thing. Molecules are molecules, the physics and chemistry, are set in stone. And so there, I don't see the same kind of issues. It's closer to human language than these operational concerns. So the simple, quick answer to your question is, I don't know, but I think it's enormously interesting.
Peter, thanks. So the confluence of AI and healthcare means, AI advances, healthcare also advances.
Yeah.
And what I didn't hear a lot about is where healthcare is advancing too. And it's consumables, it's consumer buying behavior, it's buying more alcohol and therefore maybe going in the wrong direction. It's whole genomic sequencing, maybe at birth, replacing newborn screening. So we have a whole lot more information about sleep and buying behaviors and other things that should improve healthcare.
Yeah. So I think it's really an important point, and you could imagine that data, could likely, we could guess that might dominate the in-clinic sources of data, all of the normal data that is increasingly digitized in just normal life. One bit of hope there is, I talked about these scaling properties. One of the important points of scaling properties is to get emergence. So for example, during the training of GPT models at OpenAI, without any expectation or intent, at some level of scale, suddenly the model understood what a joke was. Okay. That's an example of emergence. We are seeing the same things with Curiosity, where at some point it suddenly understood, oh, this patient is going to fee-for-service hospital, not to a value-based hospital. Just suddenly understood this concept, and so you see these kinds of things, and so this that speaks to the generalizability of these foundation models. So I have some optimism that as we broaden the kinds of digital data that might be informative to a person's healthcare, that if we have large enough, highly scaled foundation models, we would have a good chance of having those models be quick on the uptake in understanding those things. It's a bit of speculation, and maybe I'm over optimistic with that. Now, there's a second thing I just want to say, which I think is very important. About once a month, some new venture comes to Microsoft and pitches me on their startup, wanting some help from Microsoft or be acquired or investment or something. And many of those companies are little companies building medical models of one form or another. And And then a subset of those are building medical models to interface with patients. And then a subset of those are building medical models where they proudly proclaim that this model is trained only on clinic data validated by real professional clinicians. And in fact, one of those companies even said, for example, this model has no idea about who Donald Trump is. Okay, now on the surface, that seems like a good thing. But what we find, at least within Microsoft, in our evaluation of models like this, if you give such a model to an expert clinician, that's fine. But if you give it to a patient, well, patients lie. They get advice from their weird uncle. They ask questions about hydroxychloroquine. If they get asked by their doctor how many alcoholic drinks do they have in a week, they undercount massively. There's all sorts of things that happen in real life that a model can't cope with unless it's been given a chance to see the full diversity of human thought and expression and human interactions. And so as we enter more into this sort of direct-to-consumer space, I just take the lead that OpenAI has given to us and just make sure that these systems have a chance to have seen everything that human beings do, to give it a chance to be able to make these assessments. What doesn't happen in both Microsoft and OpenAI separately published papers in the last year about this. What doesn't work is to have only correct, true data in your training data as a path, for example, to eliminate hallucinations. That does not work. And you still get hallucinations. So that's the.
You can go one or two more questions. Sure, Bill, and then you can hand it to Danielle.
Great. Hi, I'm Bill. I'm another faculty member here. Thanks for talking. I feel like there's kind of two maybe slightly conflicting directions that I see happening. One is that we want to have more and more expensive foundation models that are more kind of general in their knowledge. But then also we see that it's helpful to have kind of more kind of data specific foundation models.
Yep.
And also to have systems made up of agents that each have kind of a specific task they're working on. So where do you what's the right level of abstraction? And I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, my horrible joke response to that question is, when you figure that out, please tell me. I would say that 90% of what we do in Microsoft research is just blindly following the discipline and trying to achieve a very general purpose foundation models in different domains. Like I talked about the Aurora weather model, it's a very general purpose model that has been post-trained now for a couple dozen different weather and pollution prediction problems. And that's distinct from the DeepMind weather model that is very specific, for example, in 5-day forecasts of severe weather events. And I honestly don't know, in the long run, what the better approach would be. I will say that Aurora, when specialized to 5-day severe event prediction, does just as well as DeepMind's model. Plus, we can do all these other things. But both, I think, our models are very preliminary. And so there's just a lot more research to go. I just like the practicality of the generality of these models, even though it can be very painfully expensive to achieve that first model. And so, I had a pointed question from our CEO about this, because DeepMind can run faster. They just focus on this problem. They just go out and get it out and steal all my and all that stuff. And my CEO gets upset at where I read. And I said, well, and this is totally stupid. I'm about to say, but this is what I used. Which is, well, people were building computers using vacuum tubes long before we knew how to build one with transistors. The transistor one in the end. And so we're making a similar bet. How to generalize frontier level foundation models. this is the right bet? I really don't know. But I do think it's valuable for the world that there are distinct labs taking different bets.
Hey, thanks first for your great talk. I'm Danielle Bitterman. I'm a affiliate faculty here. I'm a radiation oncologist at Permanente Harbor and a clinical lead for data science and AI at GB. And I completely agree that models have been advancing at really an incredible pace. There's huge potential, but we haven't really seen things transform fundamentally in clinical care. So I was hoping that you could speak to how you kind of see bridging the clinical evidence gap and whether you see, especially for high-risk applications that might need a prospective clinical trial, do you envision big tech companies becoming sponsors of trials, and how do you see successful partnerships there?
Yeah, so this is a big topic for me, and I really like the trial space. One of the things that with the Gigatype paper, we had a companion paper actually in the New England Journal of Medicine AI on something called Trial Scope. What's exciting now is Kaiser and Providence Health System have partnered on using Trial Scope. Microsoft doesn't have any business connection to that, but within MSR, I'm allocating resources just to make sure that Trial Scope actually works for them, because they're going to do virtual versions of 3 trials that at the minimum will allow them to assess the likelihood of a certain result from the actual human trial, and also give some validation and ability to further refine design endpoints of these trials. So as a trial design tool, it's a potentially valuable thing, just given how risky these trials are. There's another kind of administrative element of this, which is to do predictions of who to recruit and the likelihood that certain patients are recruitable. So the reason I like that space is, if you're at Microsoft, one of the challenges in healthcare is, so Microsoft is under extreme pressure from its shareholders, as are the other tech companies, to deliver double-digit revenue growth on an annual basis. There is no part of healthcare that does that. None. When we acquired Nuance, Nuance amongst publicly traded health tech companies had the highest revenue growth of any health tech company. I think it was like 7% at that time, and which is equivalent to death in the cloud business. And so that's been a real challenge. Similarly, if you look at therapeutics development, the early stage development loses money. This is what we have universities, great universities and research labs for. But there's serious money once you get into the 3rd stage of development of therapeutics. So I've had an interest in trying to balance our research portfolio to give ourselves a chance to have things that might be more profitable there, and drastically increase the likelihood of successful trial outcomes and reduce failed trials. So that's a very, very high area of interest, and we are very open to collaborators in this space.
We're going to hold it there, and so let's have a round of applause.